Your notebook chart on the left should look like this. We're asking you to know, to really learn the 6 parts of the structure: the exposition, the inciting action, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Now we're going to look at a story we read last week, The Fish Story by Mary Lou Brooks, and see if we can figure out how the series of events in this story would line up onto the plot diagram. In the very beginning of the story, Ernie's talking about things that happened in the past. He's saying, I know my dad always said these things, that when I grow up, I'm going to be unemployed. He also said how terrible his first summer job was. That already happened. All these jobs that he had happened before this story began. They're the ones that set him up for the problem he's going to have in this story. We call that setup the exposition. And so we might say for the exposition that Ernie's dad thinks that he's a loser, and Ernie kind of agrees because of his job history. So if we go over to our chart that we have on the right side of your notebook, which is where we're charting out Fish Story, you're going to want to grab a yellow highlighter, and you're going to want to note that the exposition here is this. Ernie is a kid living with his family in a normal town. His dad thinks he's going to be a failure because in the past he's made a big mess out of his summer jobs like gardening and washing cars. And Ernie agrees with his dad. Okay, then we're going to go on. We're going to say, what is the conflict in this story going to be, do we think? Well, we know that Ernie wants to prove he can be responsible. He's like, I know I can do this. So he wants to prove that his dad is wrong. What does he do to have that opportunity? Guess what? Pretty soon, the inciting action is going to start. In the inciting action, he's really surprised when the Bensons ask him to look after their house while they're away on vacation. This is going to give Ernie the problem of having another job, and hopefully he's going to have the opportunity to prove that he can do it. This isn't really lining up the way I want it. There we go. Okay, so this line right here is the inciting action. He gets to try again. The Bensons are new on the block. They haven't heard about him. If we go back to our plot diagram, we're going to take the pink marker or the pink pencil and, whoops, that's not doing it. We're going to make the inciting action, Ernie's neighbors, the Bensons, ask him to look after their home while they're on vacation. Remember his conflict is he's struggling to overcome his dad's expectations that he's a loser and he wants to prove that he's responsible. And when the Bensons offer them the chance to do the job, here's his chance to prove it. Okay, now we're going to have the rising action. The rising action is the biggest part of the story. The rising action has lots of parts. First, she gives him instructions. Then, on Tuesday, he goes for his first day on the job. And he discovers Jaws is floating on top of the water. This makes his conflict more complicated. He wants to prove he's going to do a good job, and the first thing he's done is killed the fish, he thinks. He's also worried about what his dad would say, because he knows he's going to say, "Here you go again." He worried about Jaws, but he's definitely dead. So, the first event of the rising action is that Ernie arrives late. On the first day, he discovers Jaws is dead, and he worries about what his dad will say. So here's the rising action. It's going to have lots and lots and lots of events, but this is the first thing that makes it more difficult for him to prove what he wants to prove. I also forgot to make the rising action a dot, so I'm going to do that right there. Okay, what's the next thing that happens in the story? Well, if I went back to the story, I'd discover that he keeps going over to the Bensons, acting like nothing's wrong, and he doesn't tell his parents that Jaws has died. Remember, you can make as many events along here as you want. There are things I'm sort of skipping and things I'm putting together to make it 3. You could have 4, 5, 6, even 10 events in the rising action. Eventually, Ernie buys a replacement fish for Jaws, and cleans the tank, puts the new fish in. Now, some people might say, wait a sec, this is the climax of the story, because this is the place where he's really actually taking some responsibility and showing that he can do this. But he's still hiding the fact that he's switching out the fish from his parents, and when he looks at the fish, he thinks the fish is telling him that he should feel guilty because he's still lying. So to me, this doesn't make it feel like his internal struggle is getting better. He's not really owning up to what he's doing at this point. So he's still here. This is orange and this is orange. However, when he decides to face the music, when Mrs. Benson comes home and he says, "Caught," I trudged down the stairs to face the music. It seems like this might be the first time where he's actually going to make things better for himself, because he's going to deal with the fact that he thinks he's irresponsible, and he's going to face the music. So I put this as the climax, the turning point in the story. Mrs. Benson comes over to him to pay him, and Ernie feels caught. He trudges down the stairs. After that, though, things start to fall in place. After that, Mrs. Benson tells Ernie she's grateful that he switched the fish. It turns out she knew Jaws was dead all along. And she gives Ernie extra money for house sitting in order to pay for the fish. So as we go through the story, the falling action we see right here is very short compared to the rising action, which took place over like 2 whole pages of the story. Like all of this is the rising action. The climax is really short, the falling action is really short, and then suddenly the story's over. In the end, Ernie feels good because Mrs. Benson says, it's nice to know a kid who's responsible. His mom looks proud, and his dad had a funny look on his face, but Ernie thinks he's trying not to laugh. And so everyone seems like Ernie is proven that he actually can do a job and show responsibility. His dad's not totally sure about what happened, but he seems like he's overcome his struggle and his problem is resolved. Everyone knows about Jaws, and he didn't kill him, and everything's good. Ravens, now you get to try out diagramming a story on your own, or at least with your partner. You're going to take a blank copy of the plot diagram like this, and you're going to do a plot diagram for the story that we saw, the present, the video that we saw, the present. It's really important to figure out a good conflict before you start the narrative structure diagram. One conflict could be that the boy struggles to accept his pet because the dog is missing a paw. We need to always ask ourselves, what evidence do we have that that's a good conflict? Well, one piece of evidence is when he first sees the dog, he makes a frowny face and says, "Bleh," when he realizes one of the dog's paws is missing. The other thing it's always good to ask yourself before you get started is this a conflict that gets resolved during the story? In the end, does the boy accept his pet? Yes, he does. He struggled to, but in the end he did. And the evidence of that is that they're outside playing ball together and having a lot of fun. If you picked a different conflict and it didn't resolve, then maybe that's not an actual conflict in the story. For example, if you said the boy is missing a leg, well, at the end of the story, he's still missing a leg. So that's not really a conflict that he had. Maybe struggling to do activities that require walking around would be, because in the beginning he's just playing video games, but at the end he's playing with his dog. So you need to make sure that the conflict you're choosing resolves. Ravens, you can rewatch the video of the present to collect your evidence and fill out your plot diagram by returning to the Schoology page and clicking the link for the present movie. Good luck!